Welcome to New Mexico. This first image was taken at the Organ Mountains, right behind the campsite my friend and I were at. We arrived about midday, set up camp, and started exploring, or at least we tried to explore. All of the brush that was surrounding us, as well as fences restricting where we could go, made it challenging to find and compose images that I liked. We were in a huge grand place, but I felt like we were caged in. After hiking around trails for a few hours, we decided it was time to make something to eat, and this mountain scene is what I saw when we made it back to our trailer. What caught my eye in that moment was how the sunset was creating all these interesting shadows on the mountain. Light, shadow, and contrast. Very simple. The sun was just low enough to create this interesting lighting situation on the mountain while casting the foreground in shadow. To take this shot, I chose a long telephoto lens because I wanted to compress the distance between where I was and the mountain, as well as make the mountain big and prominent in the frame. The cherry on top of everything is the wispy clouds sweeping in on the left side of the sky. The camera settings that I used here are f11 for 1/60th of a second focused on the mountain. This may not be the most dramatic or compelling image, but it was a good one to kick off on, and seeing it was an important reminder to stop and enjoy what I had right in front of me. This image is a story of persistence. Sometimes you just have to say, that didn't go the way I thought it would, what's next? Move on and go in a different direction. The shot that I had planned to get that morning just was not working out for me. After all the struggles I had finding a composition the day before, this was quite discouraging. I could have gone back to the trailer and had breakfast. Instead, I decided to walk down one of the different trails just to enjoy the morning air and see what else I would find. I came face to face with this scene where the trees were framing the mountains as they were lit up from the sunrise, giving them this beautiful golden glow. This image has strong layers, with the faint rocky path leading you into the brushy midground that separates the foreground and the mountains. I chose to use my wide-angle lens and turn my camera vertically so I could take advantage of the visual properties of the lens, as well as emphasize the distance between me and the mountains. I ended up taking two shots focused on different points and stacking them to get one photo that's in focus front to back. My camera settings were f11 for 1/5 of a second, focused on the rocks in the foreground, then focused on the mountains. I used a 4x5 crop on this image because I usually find that more visually appealing on vertical shots. There is always something to photograph. It's all about your point of view and your perspective. And light. It's always about the light too. The light makes this photo. It turned out to be so cold in the Organ Mountains at night that the heater in the trailer couldn't keep up. So my friend and I moved our itinerary up by a day and made our way to Alamogordo. My friend spotted this train yard on our way into town, and we decided to check it out after we got settled in. When we got there, the first thing I saw was this train being prepped for departure. Normally, I avoid things like buildings and vehicles in my photos. Sometimes those objects' presence can be minimized, and other times they cannot. This was one of those situations. The train is the interest of this photo, so I just had to figure out what to do with it. I chose to use a 35mm prime lens for this shot because I wanted to use distortion to stretch the scene and make the train seem farther away. I got down low to the ground and used the rails as a diagonal leading line into the distance. This perspective not only lets me create depth and imply that the train could be in motion, but also take advantage of all the texture in the rocks under the tracks. When I use leading lines in this way, I try to be mindful of where they begin or end, and I especially like to have them come from one corner of the frame to help balance the visual path that they make through the photo. My camera settings were f8 for 1/125th of a second, focused on the train. Just because something is outside of your wheelhouse or new to you doesn't mean that you can't do it or shouldn't try. Situations like this are opportunities to adapt, grow, and keep things fresh. This shot was actually right behind me. I even walked by it once without noticing. As we were getting ready to leave, I walked across these tracks again and saw this simple composition. The rails led up to this engine that I think is used for clearing the tracks, and looks like it has been out of use for a while. The engine was being side-lit by the sunset with the mountains in the background and a few clouds in the sky. I instantly knew I wanted to keep things simple with this photo. A shot doesn't always have to be complicated to be good. Once again, I used a wide-angle lens and angled it towards the ground to stretch the scene. I was much closer to this engine than I was to the other train, and I wasn't trying to imply motion, but I wanted to make the perspective interesting. I chose to frame the rails as vertical leading lines rather than diagonally to add some symmetry to the image. Like the last shot, my camera settings were f8 for 1/125th of a second, focused on the engine. I used a square crop on this photo because I wanted to further simplify the composition and eliminate any distracting elements in the sides of the image. Sometimes it is more important what you leave out. Don't overlook things, be aware of everything around you and keep your eyes open. You don't want to miss something special. And don't overthink or overcomplicate things. More is not always better. These images are all about perspective, whether it is the perspective they were shot from or the perspective I gained while I was shooting them. Something that I love about photography is the self-reflection that it affords and the opportunities to just forget about everything else while connecting with a scene. I hope you enjoyed this video. I always welcome feedback, so please leave a comment below. The blog post for these images is up on my site, and if you would like to check that out, I'll have a link for it in the description below. There's more to come. Part 2 will be out around this time next month, so please consider subscribing. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like. Bye for now.